people. You're welcome to today's class. Today we are going to look at salt. We are given any question on salt. We are going to say the examples we have on salt, under simplification of salt. The first one we have says simplify the following: salt 45, B salt 98, salt 60, and salt 12. When you are given any question on salt, solve the same thing as what square root. So when you are given a question on salt, the first thing you have to do is to look for that two multiples, those two numbers, that when you multiply it, it will give you that number. But the first number must have a square root. If it does not have a square root, please don't use it. Because just for example, let's take an example, 12. We have different numbers, multiples of 12. And 6 times 2 will give us 12. 1 times 12 will give us 12. 4 times 2 will give us 12. But among these three numbers now, there must be a number that has a square root among them. So the one that has a square root among them, which is 4 times 3, that is the one that we can use for salt 12. So the same thing applies for any number given to you on salt. When you are given any question on salt, first you have to do is to look for that two numbers, then when you multiply it, it will give you that number. But the first number must have a square root. So we are going to look at the examples we have on the board. The first one we have here is what? Salt 45. So I'm going to say what are those two numbers, and when we multiply it, it will give us 45. But the first number must have a square. We have different multiples of 45. 1 times 45 will give us 45. Now, so 9 times 5 will give us what? 45. So I'm going to use what? 9 times 5. 9 times 5. You can see that the first number here has a square root. So the number that has a square root among the two numbers you are using, the first number must have a square root. So what we are going to do, when we have gotten to this stage, we are going to split each of the numbers inside the square root. Split each of them into their various salt. So what we are going to have here is going to be salt 9 times salt 5. When you have done this, the next thing is to look for the square root of the first number. The square root of 9 will give us what? 3 times salt 5. So our answer here is what? 3 salt 5. You bring out the square root of the first number, then add the second number that does not have a square root. You add them together, just like you have saying 8 times b. 8 times b will give us what? AB. Is that not so? That is the same thing that applies here. 9 times 5. So 9 gives us 3. Then bring your 5 together with salt 5 together with your 3. So that gives us what? 3 salt 5. So this is our answer. So now when you are given a question on salt, look for those two numbers that when you multiply it, it will give you that it will give you that number. Then but the first one must have a square root. So we are going to look at example B now. We have what? Salt 98. So the two numbers we are going to use for 98 that will give us the first number must have a square root is what? 49 times 2. 49 times 2 will give us 98. Is that not so? Fine. So the next one we are going to split each of these numbers into their various salts. So I'm going to write what? Salt 49 times salt 2. So the square root of 49 will give us what? 7. 7 to what? Salt 2. Once you have gotten the square root of the first number, attach the second number that has salt. Attach it to the one you have gotten your square root. That becomes your answer. So we'll go to the third one we have here, which is what? Salt 60. The two numbers we are going to use for 60 is going to be what? 4 times 15 will give us 60. Is that not so? Like now, if you look at this now, 30 times 2 will give us 60. But 30 does not have a square root, so we cannot use that. That was why I said earlier that when you are given any question or salt, you have to go for the one that has the square root. And the first number must have a square root. If it does not have a square root, don't use that number. That is why it is called salt. Salt is the same thing as square root. If you look at the symbol now, this is the sign of square root. This sign is what? For square root. Now, so this is the same thing as well, square root. So we also call it as well salt. So when you're given a question of salt, you have to look for the first, make sure that you use the number that has a square root, and that number must be the first number. Then you pick the first number that has a square root, and that when you multiply it, will give you that number. So look at this now, 60. 30 times 2 will give us 60, but we cannot use that one because 30 does not have a square root. So what we are going for is what? 4 times 15. So now when you have done this, we are going to split each of them into their various salt. We are going to have this as well, salt 4 times salt 15. The square root of 4 will give us what? 2. Then bring your salt 15 closer to it. So we have this as 2 salt 15. So this becomes our answer. Then we go to the last one. Then we have there is what? D, which is what? Sort 12. As I said earlier, the multiples of 12 we have here is what? 1 times 12 will give us 12. 6 times 2 will give us 12. 4 times 3 will give us 12. These are the different numbers that we will multiply it to give us 12. But you are now within you are now going to, if you understand the meaning of so, you now have to know the one you are going to choose among them. So as I said earlier, it is only the number that the first number has the square root you are going to make use of. If you look at the 6 does not have the square root, so we cannot use 6 times 2. This is wrong, this is wrong. So what we are going to use was 4 times 3. So I'm going to write now the two multiples of 12 that the first number has the square root is what? 4 times 3. So when you have done this, the next thing you are going to do, I'm going to split each of the numbers into their various sort. So I'm going to write this as what? Equals to sort 4 times what? Sort 3. The square root of 4 will give us what? 2. So we have this as what? 2 to sort 3. So that is our answer. So we are going to look at now example 2. Let's go for example 2. Example 2 says, express the following as single sort. Now we have done the first one, so we want to express this ones now as single sort. From single sort, normally from single sort you can get this previous example one that we have done now. So now we are going to say now for us to get the single sort, I'm going to say 2 sort 5. For you to get a single sort, you are going to square the number that is outside. You have to square the number that is outside times the number that is inside the sort. That gives you your answer. So what am I trying to say now? I'm going to square the number that is outside, bringing out my single sort. Then the number that is outside here is 2. So this is saying as well 2 raised to power 2. You have to square whatever number that is outside the sort. You square it times the number that is inside the square root. So I'm going to say times what? 5. So 2 times 2 will give us what? Put your sort. 2 times 2 will give us what? 4. 2 raised to power 2 means 2 times 2. 2 times 2 will give us what? 4 times what? 5. So you times 4 times 5 will give us what? 20. So this is our answer. From this now, you can check if your answer is correct. Just like what we did here now, you can as well check if your answer is correct. So if, for example, we want to check now, check if our answer is correct by saying what we have here is sort 20. Then also we want to check if what we have done will give us the question we have there. You are going to make use of what? This example one we did now, and similar sort. So when you are going to say look for the number that when you multiply it will give you what? 20, but the first number must have the square root. So I'm going to say what? For me to get 20 is going to go 4 times 5. 4 times 5 will give us 20. So I'm going to do what? Square each of them and put each of them into their various sort, which was sort 4 times what? Sort 5. Sort 4 will give us what? 2. Then to what? Sort 5. So this is my answer. You can see now that the checking we have here gave us our question, which is what? 2 sort 5. So our answer is what? Correct. So when you are given any question on single sort, first thing you have to do is to multiply the number, square the number that is outside. But you square the number that is outside, times it with the number that is inside that sum. Then after doing that, that gives you your final answer. So we are going to look at now example B. Let's look at example B. 17 sort 2. So we are going to square 17 sort 2. So we are going to square 17 now. So this will give us what? Square root of what? 17 squared times 2. So what we are going to do now is this. We are going to square 17. So 17 times 17 will give us what? So we are going to look at the B part. So we have what? 17 to what? Square sort 2. So what we are going to do, we are going to square what? The outside number, which was 17 squared times what? 2. So 17 times 17 will give us what? 289. Then times 2. So when we times it, 289 times 2 give us 500 and what? 78. So this is our answer. So when you are given any question on sort, so on simplification of sort, first you have to do, mostly if it's just a single sort like this, if it's a single sort, first you have to do is to look for the two numbers, and when you multiply it, it will give you that question given to you. But the first number must have a square root. So once you have done that, you now split each of them into their various sort. After splitting each of them into their various sort, then you look for the square root of the first number. And then when you have gotten the square root of the first number, attach it with the sort of the second number, the second number that does not have a square root. So that becomes your answer. What am I trying to say is this: we are having sort 45 here. The numbers we are using for 45, that the first one have a square root is what? 9 times 5. So what I've written my 9 times 5. Then the next one I'm going to do is to split each of them into their various sort and their various square root, which is what? Sort 9 times sort 5. Then you look for the square root of what? 9 to give us what? 3. Then you bring down your sort 5 attached to it, which is what? 3 sort 5. So this becomes our answer. Now, as this question is now, you can as well check if your answer is correct. And if your answer will give you your question. So let me just put check in here. If you want to check, you can say 3 sort 5. I want to check if my answer will give me the question. So now I'm going to say that is the symbols of, that is example 2. But you can use that to check if your answer is right. So now I'm going to say square the outside number. I'm going to square the outside number times what is inside that sort. So this is going to give me 3 square. The number we have here is 3 sort 5. So I'm going to square 3 square times what? 5. 3 times 3 will give us what? 9 times 5. So 9 times 5 will give us what? 45. So you can see my answer here is the same thing with the question we have here. So that is the way how you can check if what you have done is right. So when you want to check, it's just for you to use the single sort method by doing what? Multiplying the squaring the number that is outside times the number that is inside that sort. So that gives you your answer. So that is for the A part. The same thing applies to what? B part. So you do the same thing, look for the two numbers, and when you multiply it, it will give you the question given to you, but the first number must have a square root. Once you have done that, you split each of them into their various sort. After splitting each of them, you look for the one that has the square root. So after getting the one that has the square root, you attach the one that does not have the square root to closer to the one that has the square root. That becomes your answer. The same thing applies here. The same thing we did there. So when you are given any question on sum, mostly a single sort, look for the two numbers that has that the two multiples of that number given to you, that the first one must have the square root. Once you have gotten that, you now split each of them into their various sort. Then you look for the square root of the first number. You attach this other number to it, just like the same thing that I got A times B. A times B, same thing as well, AB. So when you have gotten the square root of the first one that has you have gotten the square root of the first one, what you just have to do is to bring the second number or close to it, just like A times B giving you what? The same thing as AB. So that's what I'm trying to say. So this times here is the same thing as the two numbers being together and bringing the two numbers together. So that is it. So the same thing applies here. Then we go for what? A single sort. You say express the following as single sort. We want to express this as a single sort. First, that is what we just did now. So first you have to do now is to square the number that is outside the square root. Square it. Any number that is outside the square, you have to square it. It is the square of that number times the number that's inside your sort that gives you your answer. So now we have what? 2 sort 5. This is going to say 2 raised to power 2 times what? 5. 2 raised to power 2 will give us what? 4. 4 times 5 will give us what? 20. So if you want to check now if this your sort 20 will give you 2 sort 5, which is your question, all you need to do is to look for the two multiples of 20. There are two multiples that when you times it, it will give you 20. But the first one will have a square, which is what? 4 times what? 5. 4 times 5 will give us 20. Then also, then you split each of them. When you split each of them, you find out that the square root of 4 will give us what? 2 towards 5, which is our question. Yeah, so that is the same thing. So the next thing while going back the checking I wrote here before, you can see that is what we have here checking. For you to check if this square 20 will give you what? 2 sort 5. That is why I wrote checking here. You can see there's a checking here to check if what you have done is correct. You see, sort 20 will give us what? Sort 4 times 5. You split each of them. When you split each of them, you have what? 4 times what? Square 5. The square root of 4 will give you 2. You attach it to your 5. So this is answer here is the question we have here. So you can see that is it. So that is the only way you can do. You can check if what you have done is what? Correct. Then we'll go to the next one, B. We have 17 sort 2. You square the number, square 17 times what? 2. Times the number that is inside, which is what? Square 17 times 2. So square root of square 17 is same as 17 times 17. Now this times 17 will give us what? 289 times 2. Then 289 times 2 give us what? 275. That is our answer. So when you are given any question like this on sort, mostly if you are given any question that there is a number outside the sort, all you need to do, and your hands to simplify, all you need to do is just to square that number that is outside. No matter the question given to you, provided there's a number outside the sort and your hands to simplify the sort, just go straight by squaring the number that is outside, and multiply it times it with what is inside that sort. That will give you your final answer. That is how we simplify what? Sort that has for us to change it to what? Put it into what? A single sort. Then if you are given a question like this and you are asked to simplify, you are given a single sort and you are asked to simplify. The next, what you just have to do is to look for that two numbers, and when you multiply it, it will give you that number, but the first one must have a square root. If it does not have a square root, please don't make use of that number, because you will not have your right, you will not get your answer, because sort is the same thing as well, square root. So when you are solving, you have to go for the one that has the first number that has a square root. Go for the numbers, the two numbers that the first one must have a square root. And once you have done that, split each of them into their various sort, into their various square root. Then you look for the one that has a square root among the numbers you have chosen. Then attach the one that does not have a square root to the one that has a square root that you have already chosen. That becomes your answer. So that is all. That is what we are going to stop for today on sort. So thank you very much.